In September of 2025, astronomers were still struggling to explain the strange behavior of 3I Phi Atlas when something even stranger appeared. Atlas had already unsettled the field with its sudden bursts of acceleration, its nickel-rich spectrum, and the shockwave that rippled past Mars. Now telescopes pointed at its growing coma began to see faint companions. At first, observers assumed they were fragments breaking away from the core. Comets often shed pieces as they near the sunday, but the motion of these new points of light did not match fragments drifting off into space. They moved in formation. When amateur astronomers processed long-exposure images, faint trails appeared around the main body. Some of these streaks curved and then corrected, like small objects adjusting their path. Others appeared, disappeared, and then reappeared again, as if their brightness was being controlled rather than determined by sunlight alone. By the last week of September, the count had risen from 1 or 2 faint specks to dozens. Independent teams in Chile, Japan, and South Africa logged clusters of moving companions orbiting near Atlas. The discovery set off heated debate. Fragments normally spread out along the orbit of a parent body. They trail behind or move ahead in predictable arcs. The companions of Atlas did not spread. They hovered, some in tight arcs close to the coma, others farther out but still locked to the main object's motion. The shape looked more like a swarm than a debris field. The language shifted overnight. What began as fragments in official bulletins became secondary objects in online forums and podcasts. Some called them drones. Professional observatories confirmed the detections within days. The Subaru telescope in Hawaii, with its wide-field imaging, captured at least 7 distinct companions with magnitudes between 15 and 18, faint but real. The Vera Rubin Observatory, still in commissioning, caught streaks in its deep fields that matched the swarm pattern. Every dataset pointed to the same unsettling fact: Atlas was not alone. It was surrounded. The first natural explanation suggested that Atlas was fragmenting under stress. If the core contained volatile pockets, explosive vents could throw off chunks of rock and ice. Those chunks might stick close for a time before dispersing. But the behavior of the swarm contradicted that idea. The objects did not drift outward chaotically. Instead, they corrected course. Some even curved back toward Atlas. That motion implied control. At the very least, it implied forces other than simple momentum and gravity. Radar observations added another layer. The Goldstone dish in California bounced signals off Atlas and its companions. The echoes revealed small, discrete scatterers near the core, each a few hundred meters across. That was too large for dust, too organized for random debris. Astronomers described it as a halo of satellites. The word carried weight. If Atlas was natural, then it had somehow spawned moons. If it was not natural, then the swarm was deliberate. The growth of the swarm coincided with Atlas's bursts of activity. Each time the comet brightened, more faint objects appeared. In one case, a long exposure sequence showed a new companion separating cleanly from the coma during a brightness spike, then stabilizing in a nearby orbit. It looked less like a chunk thrown off by pressure and more like a launch. The possibility sent shockwaves through the community. Some observers proposed a simpler scenario. The swarm might be illusions, background stars smeared by motion, or imaging artifacts caused by the glare of the coma. But independent checks ruled that out. The same points of light moved in step across multiple telescopes, across different nights, across different continents. They were real, and their number was rising. By the start of October, the count had reached more than 30. The companions ranged in brightness, suggesting different sizes, but they all stayed within a narrow zone around the core. The swarm had taken on a shape, some clustered close in, within 1,000 kilometers of Atlas. Others traced wider arcs tens of thousands of kilometers away. The geometry resembled shells like layers of satellites in orbit. The precision disturbed even the most cautious researchers. For comparison, Earth's artificial satellites form shells around the planet: low Earth orbit, medium orbit, and geostationary. The swarm around Atlas looked eerily similar. not random scatter, but tiers. In astronomy forums, diagrams of Atlas swarm were overlaid on maps of Earth's satellite constellations. The resemblance was hard to ignore. Agencies began to restrict data again. Public streams from NASA's solar observatories stopped showing the relevant field. ESA issued no further updates on the radar echoes. Amateur astronomers filled the silence with their own images. Grainy but clear, they showed clusters of points moving with Atlas. Each night, the swarm seemed thicker. Some estimated more than 50 companions by early October. The timing was critical. Atlas was days away from the blackout window when ground-based telescopes would lose sight of it in the Sunday's glare. If the swarm expanded further during that period, no official instruments would report it in real time. The blackout was already raising suspicion. Now, with companions multiplying, the suspicion deepened. To explain the swarm naturally, some scientists pointed to tidal forces. As Atlas neared the Sunday, gravity could tear off fragments. But tidal disruption creates streams, not shells. It creates long trains of fragments following the orbit. The objects near Atlas did not follow in a line, they circled, held in place, corrected when disturbed. One striking observation came from a small observatory in Spain. Tracking Atlas for several hours, the team saw one of the companions suddenly brighten, then dim again. The event lasted less than 10 minutes. No dust cloud explained the flash. The brightness curve looked like reflection, as if the object had reoriented and caught sunlight at a new angle. The signature was the same kind of glint satellites give off when their solar panels flare toward Earth. Another group in Japan recorded paired motion. Two of the companions appeared to change course in sync, arcing together before resuming their original track. Such coordination suggested interaction. Natural fragments do not turn in tandem. They drift independently. Coordinated turning hinted at communication or linked control. As more data poured in, astronomers began to map the swarm's structure. It showed radial spacing, with some objects stationed at fixed distances. The pattern was not exact, but it was regular enough to suggest design. Some theorists argued that Atlas was deploying probes, each taking position like a satellite around a planet. If so, the object was not just a comet, it was a carrier. Energy estimates fueled the debate. Each new companion would require momentum to leave the core and settle into orbit. The accelerations observed earlier in Atlas implied an internal power source on the order of gigawatts. That same source could eject and control secondary objects. If the companions were probes, the energy demands lined up with the power already inferred from Atlas's bursts. The math, however wild, was consistent. The shockwave event near Mars took on new context. Some proposed that it was not an accident but a deployment test. The pulse could have been a method of clearing the environment, stabilizing the region before releasing swarms. Others suggested it was a beacon, signaling to SWAN, the larger interstellar object inbound from the opposite direction. The swarm then became part of a rendezvous. Comparisons to past anomalies resurfaced. Oumuamua, in 2017, had shown unexplained acceleration, but no swarm. Comet Borisov in 2019 behaved like a normal comet. Atlas went further than both, with bursts, a shockwave, and now companions. The escalation suggested a sequence: scout, probe, carrier. The pattern raised uncomfortable questions. Meanwhile, public interest exploded. Social media filled with images, animations, and speculation. Amateur astronomers became the main source of updates. Each clear night added new dots to the swarm. Some observers claimed to see faint lines linking companions, as if trails of material connected them. Others warned those were artifacts of processing. The uncertainty only made the story spread faster. By the 5th of October, less than 3 days before the blackout, the swarm reached unprecedented size. Some counts suggested more than 100 distinct objects. They spanned tens of thousands of kilometers around Atlas, forming a cloud visible even in modest telescopes. The main body still blazed at magnitude 7, its tail sweeping through Virgo. Around it, the swarm glittered faintly, like a broken necklace spread across the stars. Astronomers faced a dilemma: official channels stressed natural explanations, citing fragmentation and outgassing. Yet, the formation behavior resisted those models. Unofficial chatter admitted bafflement. A comet shedding fragments does not create shells of satellites. A comet does not release companions that glint like panels and move in coordinated arcs. The data contradicted the statements, and the contradiction eroded trust. Scenarios multiplied. If the swarm was natural, then Atlas represented a new class of interstellar body, capable of fragmenting in stable shells. That would demand a rewrite of cometary dynamics. If the swarm was artificial, then Atlas was deploying devices in the inner solar system for reasons unknown. Either scenario was profound. Observers imagined what it would look like up close. From Mars orbit, an astronaut would see a brilliant comet core surrounded by dozens of small bodies, each reflecting sunlight in faint flashes. They would drift in arcs, some closer, some farther, a silent ballet against the red dust of the Martian sky. From Earth, a backyard astronomer could see only faint dots. But even faint dots carried weight when they multiplied night after night. The blackout arrived on schedule as the Sunday's glare swallowed Atlas. The swarm vanished from ground-based view. For 10 days, official data streams went dark. Independent observers could only speculate. Some listened with radio dishes, hoping to catch plasma pulses or faint transmissions. A few claimed to detect structured signals, but without confirmation, the claims remained unverified. The blackout guaranteed that whatever happened during perihelion would remain hidden until later. When Atlas re-emerged on the far side of the Sunday, the swarm was larger still. Images from amateur telescopes showed even more companions. The count defied easy numbers, but estimates suggested hundreds. The formation stretched outward, wrapping the comet in layers like an onion. The growth had not slowed, it had accelerated. The behavior left astronomers baffled. No natural mechanism accounted for it cleanly. No official statement satisfied the data. And yet the images were there, night after night, 3I Atlas. Once a single faint point of light was now a central body surrounded by a swarm of companions. A spectacle that forced every observer to reconsider what an interstellar object could be.